Go ahead, man.
Good morning. This is the Board of County Commissioners work session. It is Wednesday, February 1st, 2023. It is 9:03 a.m. This session is set to go until 9:30 a.m. We're at 3000 Pacific Avenue, room 110. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. Vice Chair Ty Menser is in the boardroom. Commissioner Gary Edwards joining maybe a Zoom. And we also have County Manager Ramiro Chavez in the boardroom. Do we have Robin?
It's not Robin, but we have Josh and his team, if you allow them to introduce themselves.
Perfect. So we'll go ahead and do staff introductions. And the topic of today's agenda is community planning, community agriculture, and voluntary stewardship program update. So with that, I'll pass it on to Josh, and if Josh can do introductions of staff.
Joshua Cummings, Community Planning and Economic Development Director, accompanied by Chris Chapeau, the Community Planning Manager, and her team member, Ashley Arai. What's your title, Ashley?
Agriculture Community Program Manager.
Agriculture Community Program Manager. And as the board has seen on a couple of occasions, thank you for funding this position. Ashley's really taken it by the horns, as it were, speaking agriculturally.
Speaking agriculturally.
And done a great job on many of the topics. So this is an information-only briefing. This is Voluntary Stewardship Program, and this is just to continue to keep the board apprised of the great work that's being done in the community by Ashley and others. So, Chris, Ashley, take it away.
Yeah, so I'll just wait for the presentation to come up. In the meantime, good morning. I am happy to be here today to provide an update on our new community agriculture program and the county's voluntary stewardship program. I am joined here by Marguerite Oplanov from Thurston Conservation District. She's their agriculture programs manager. And so as we dive into the voluntary stewardship program, we'll have her come join us at the table and be able to answer questions. So I do plan to cover what the new community agriculture program encompasses and all the exciting things we have in store for 2023 and 2024. Then I'll switch gears and provide an overview of the county's voluntary stewardship program, and I hope to leave plenty of time at the end for questions. So as Josh mentioned, creating an agricultural liaison has been a long-standing community initiative. The Agriculture Advisory Committee identified it in their Working Land Strategic Plan way back in 2010 as a key strategy to conserve working lands and service connection between farmers, the county, and our regional resource providers. This sentiment has been echoed in the Thurston County Comprehensive Plan and the 2021 Community Agriculture Survey. The board did formally create the position last year, and I was brought on in the fall to launch the program. Next slide, please. So what is it? The program is housed in community planning, and it augments the amazing work that Wazoo Extension is already doing to provide technical assistance to farmers and keep the ag industry viable here in Thurston County. The program elements will include helping farmers navigate our complex permitting processes while identifying barriers that we may be able to work through moving forward. We're also looking at ways to protect farmland and support our farmers through innovative land use strategies. We're promoting and growing the land conservation tools we have available to us, such as the transfer or purchase of development rights, as well as the open space tax incentive program. And finally, we're supporting the work of our partners. We've got a lot of great ones here in the county. So whether that be through economic development, like Thurston and Pierce County's new livestock processing study, or training for new farmers like Wazoo's Cultivating Success program. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of initiatives as we look out over the next 2 years that we're going to try to work through. I was just here yesterday requesting a public hearing on docket item A18, so that's one of the first ones, and that would create a conservation planning approach for new agricultural uses. We also have a briefing coming up here in about a month and a half to expand the open space tax incentive program so more farms are eligible. We do have an application in for a grant to update our TDR and PDR programs to be more effective tools in protecting farmland and supporting farmers, and we hope to hear about that grant later this month. We're updating our long-term agricultural zoning, and we have a stakeholder work group we've been working with for the past few months, and we hope to have options available to bring to the Planning Commission here in a few months. We're starting to refresh the Working Land Strategic Plan, that document I referenced. It's about 12 years old at this point and doesn't necessarily reflect the latest data or community initiatives that might make most sense moving forward. Also in the works are developing permit toolkits, working with our partners, as well as other handy resources to help demystify our development review process. And last but not least, a tie into voluntary stewardship, or the voluntary stewardship program, we are completing our second 5-year monitoring report, which is due here this next year. Next slide, please. So community is in the title, and it is a key component of this program to build relationships across a broad and diverse range of stakeholders. So up here is just a list of our initial community building activities, and as the program grows, our relationships will grow. And I'm open to questions on this piece before we switch to voluntary stewardship program. I just wanted to provide some highlights and overview. Any?
Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
Maybe this is going to be covered, but I'm just wondering as we move along here on farmland and protection, is there any work going on so that farmers that want to raise crops, for an example, would have easier access to water? That, you know, due to the Hearst decision, it's been quite restricted. And I don't know how we can have farm activity if you don't have adequate water. And then that'd be one question. And then maybe the farmland itself. Do we have different categories in Thurston County than, say, Pierce County or other counties as far as the designation of what is or what is not, and maybe the loss because of those differing designations is maybe not quite maybe it's apples and oranges with another jurisdiction. I don't know if I made myself clear, but something like that. Could you cover it?
Yeah, so as part of the long-term agriculture stakeholder work group, we've done a lot of research into what other Western Washington counties have in terms of their zoning for agriculture. And most of them have like a long-term agriculture zoning similar to us, as well as agriculture allowed in their other resource zones. And then some of the counties have like overlays, not necessarily like our agritourism overlay, but maybe just an agricultural protection overlay. And so all of those zoning tools and land use strategies are being explored in that work group, and will hopefully be part of that package that moves forward.
How about the water issue with water restrictions? So say I wanted to raise carrots on my 5-acre parcel and I'm limited on water. So maybe I can't raise carrots and I'll have to raise wheat, or what? That's my question.
Yeah, so we have been in contact with the Department of Ecology to better understand water. I don't necessarily have answers to the questions. It's really complex, but it is definitely something that's been on our radar and is raised by farmers here that don't have water rights allocated already, and are looking to start a new farm. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add on the water situation.
I think the question is a good one, Commissioner, and we'll research it more.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Menzer, any questions?
Well, Commissioner Edwards' first question kind of raised a question for me, because I know there's been questions I've been asked about how we handle, like, it kind of goes to like when you're trying to assess, okay, Thurston County's lost 15% of its farmland or whatever. Well, are we counting the same methodology? And Skagit only lost whatever, but if you're just counting zoning, like or land that's zoned, you know, there's like, I think of it as 3 levels. There's like land that is being farmed, wherever it is. There's land that's zoned to be farmed, whether it is or isn't being farmed, but you've set it aside in some way or designated it. And then there's land that, what's my third?
Could be, but not zoned.
Oh, no, then there's land that should be farmed. It's you're looking at the agricultural soils and saying, this land, whether we zoned it for zoning or whether anyone is farming it, that's prime farmland soil. And so depending on who you're talking to at what time, you're talking about three different things. And then there's, when it comes to the zoning and categories, you know, some jurisdictions, I think, only are counting what, you know, farms of 20 acres or more or whatever. And a lot of folks come to me concerned that we've got a lot of farming activity in Thurston County that happens on much smaller, like urban, even within the UGA. Okay, we're supposed to be dense and build housing everywhere, but there's people doing farming in the UGA. So are we trying to protect that because we're in a borderline crisis of loss of agricultural farmland? And if we should do that, because that land either has the soils underneath it, maybe we didn't, you know, maybe we want to make it dense and is our urban area, but either has good farming soil underneath or people are doing it. It's either in category 1 or 3 that I laid out. Then should we be trying to protect that or designate it or counting it or all of that? So I get asked these questions and I just get confused because I don't know, what are we talking about here and what are we trying to solve? Are we trying to, I mean, is it gonna solve the problem to just designate a bunch more zoning, but we're not really affecting, is that gonna overlay where the soils are, or is that gonna protect the urban farming activities that we have?
So look at, real quick, look at page 6.
Yeah.
And the third bullet.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be what Ashley will cover, the LTA working zoning stakeholder group.
Yeah, I would say those are all the right questions. Those are all the questions that have been coming up in the stakeholder work group. And the answer that we keep relaying to the stakeholder work group is that there's a lot of different tools in the toolkit. And so we need to be working with all of those tools if we're gonna effectively protect farmland and support farmers. It's not just one of them, it's how they all work together. And so I would say hold on to all those questions and they're all gonna be very relevant when we have that LTA zoning package or of options that moves forward. But those are, yeah.
So we had this conversation about a year and a half ago about the map, remember the map on LTA? And the guidance we got was go out to the community and get that input and bring it back to the board so that there can be some answers to some of those questions. And so Ashley has been engaged with the LTA stakeholder group. Last night she was here until 8 o'clock talking to the local farmers and people engaged in agriculture to just get right to the heart of some of those questions. So I think it's coming, and we're in the process of trying to get those answers too. But if you get folks asking you, direct them to Ashley and have them participate in that stakeholder group. We're looking for participate with information. They can provide information to Ashley. And that's your resource. So send them our way.
Yeah, I mean, because like, it was like, my question back to them was like, well, how much of Thurston, what percentage of Thurston County farming is occurring within UGA? Is it 1% or is it 20%? You know, if it's,
How you slice it.
in terms of how you, when you want to create protections, you know, like it's going to be necessary in order to stop the aggregate farmland loss. Anyway, so that was one question. My other question for you was just on your previous slide when you say, wait, let's see, 4, 5, no, I'm going to go back to implement. Sorry, I'm missing, it was something about update. I'm sorry, I missed it. It had something to do with innovative land use.
Maybe let's do VSP and come back to it.
Is that word?
Innovative land use strategies.
Yeah, where is that? In the bullets. Why am I not seeing it?
It is community agriculture program overview. So.
Yeah, sorry. Right, so slide 4, the bullet under the sub, there's a bullet and then there's sub-bullets. Sub-bullet 2 says, program elements include protecting farmland through innovative land use planning and policies. Is that, can you say more about what an example of that might be?
Yeah, so 818, which is probably the project you're most familiar with because the briefing was last month, you know, using a conservation planning approach, providing a pathway for conservation projects to be built on the ground, those new ag facilities within our critical areas. That would be one innovative approach that isn't necessarily, or didn't exist before, that will provide more opportunity for farmers to protect and enhance critical areas.
And what does that mean for the Board of County Commissioners? Like, what do we have to do to create that? Do we have to change the code? Do we have to fund a new staff member? Like, what does it mean to do what you just said, use conservation planning approach?
Yeah, so in that case, it was a development code amendment. So it's the repeal and replacement of a chapter of the development code. And moving forward, it's, identifying other opportunities like that.
That's
Brief.
an A18.
Yep, that's A18, and there are other pieces of CP 16, that community-driven review of agricultural policies and programs that will be coming before you in the next year. That all, my approach is always sort of in, let's take a fresh look, let's try to be innovative, let's look to the future rather than the past. And so I feel like every project that is going to be coming before you under that umbrella will have an innovative bent to it. And I'm happy to highlight those if you'd like when we give the presentations.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, I do have a question, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Ramiro.
And that is on slide 5, the bullet before last. It says develop permitting toolkit, and you made a comment of demystify the development process. Help me understand what that really means in terms of the toolkit for permitting.
Yeah,
Demystifying the development code.
Yeah, well, a lot of it's just, when you come to the counter, the staff is really, really helpful, but it's just figuring out what permits you need. A lot of the development code wasn't necessarily written with agriculture in mind. It's more written with commercial development or industrial development. So kind of figuring out how those provisions apply to agriculture. There's also a great model, Pierce County, who's had a similar position to mine for about 4 years, has put together all these great permitting toolkits, and they're targeted to either existing farmers or new farmers. And it's just, it really is like these application packets with information about, if you want to do this, here are the permits that apply, here are the questions that you should be thinking about. And so I've already reached out to them, and we hope to have something like that ready by the end of the year for our farmers here in Thurston County.
Thank you.
VSP?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll provide a little bit of background, and then we've got some highlights of how the program is doing here in Thurston County. So the Voluntary Stewardship Program is an alternative to the traditional Growth Management Act approach to protecting critical areas. It is designed to balance critical areas protection with agricultural viability. And so whereas the GMA typically requires regulatory buffers or things of that nature to protect critical areas at a parcel scale or that individual site scale, the Voluntary Stewardship Program relies on monitoring work plan goals at a watershed scale. So we have 4 watersheds here in the county. So these goals include the protection and enhancement of critical areas, implementation and outreach, as well as agricultural viability, and we'll be reporting on all of those. The program is entirely voluntary, and any existing ongoing agricultural operation can enroll and participate. Our partner, Thurston Conservation District, Marguerite's team, they take the lead on implementation and outreach while the county takes the lead on the monitoring and the reporting. And all of our work is overseen by the VSP work group, which is comprised of farmers, and we've got representation from TRPC, and in attendance we usually have a lot of the state agencies. And the next big milestone for us is, I'm calling it the 10-year monitoring report, but it's our second 5-year monitoring report, and that's due July 2024. Next slide, please. So here's a timeline that just highlights the program milestones. We did enroll back in 2011 as a county, and we were one of the first in the state. The clock for our monitoring reporting didn't actually start until 2014 when the state funds were received to develop the VSP work plan. So that work plan was completed in 2017, and our first 5-year monitoring report was filed only 2 years later in 2019. So it didn't actually report on a full 5 years, which makes the upcoming monitoring report particularly important since we now have a significant body of data to actually report on. Next slide, please. And preliminary indicators for that reporting are pointing in the right direction, so that's good. We will have additional information in the coming year as we delve into the data more. We just developed our schedule and work plan for developing that monitoring report. But here are a few program highlights that Marguerite and her team over at Thurston Conservation District helped me compile. We currently have more than 100 farmers enrolled, and they do represent more than 4,500 acres across all 4 watersheds. There have been more than 250 conservation practices voluntary implemented through the VSP, and that doesn't even count conservation practices that that might have been implemented through other programs like National Resource Conservation Service programs. Ever since the state really started funding these cost share projects, we've seen nearly $500,000 invested in the last 2 years in those projects here in Thurston County. Thurston Conservation District also maintains a robust outreach program reaching 2,000 plus people each year. And we're also making important strides to improve agricultural viability, like removing permit barriers for conservation projects and expanding eligibility for tax incentives. And that's pretty much it. I knew I only had 30 minutes. I wanted to make sure I had time for questions. And so I tried to keep it high level, and I'm happy to answer questions about VSP, and Marguerite is here as well if you have questions for the Thurston Conservation District.
So actually, just let me get this kind of right. With the VSP, the Voluntary Stewardship Program, the plan is created with the Conservation District, like how they're gonna conserve the land and do the agriculture, and then we monitor whether or not that plan is being implemented?
Yes, so the Thurston Conservation District get to work with individual farmers at that parcel scale, and they develop these individual stewardship plans, and they try to guide the appropriate conservation practices on that site. We do all of our monitoring reporting at a watershed scale.
Gotcha.
And that is partially to protect the privacy of the farms. And as well as, we're looking at the protection and enhancement of those critical areas, just, few levels up from that individual site and trying to balance it across the whole watershed.
Marguerite, what are your thoughts on the partnership?
So I just want to thank everyone for letting me come out here today. And I think that the Voluntary Stewardship Program has been a great bridge to let farmers be educated, also give them access to technical assistance. I've seen a lot of farmers get plans, implement best management practices quickly on the ground. I've worked as a planner for over 5 years previously in the Lewis Conservation District, and I've written many conservation or farm plans where we've looked at all different resource concerns, and that's, soil, water, air, plants, animals, humans, energy. And for VSP, we're primarily just looking at critical areas. And so it's a little leaner than your standard farm plan. And so we're able to really hone in on just the critical areas and able to protect those and also focus on agricultural viability, which is really important to farmers when they're thinking about how they can get their operation thriving in Thurston County. We have a lot of dynamic and diverse farms here in this area of the state. So they have to be really, they have to move quick on the market. And so having these farm plans or these ISPs they don't take as long to develop, and we're able to get them access to funding opportunities. It's just wonderful. It's been great working with Ashley, and I feel that with her position here at the county, we've had access to a better partnership working with the county. I know that when I first worked at the Thurston Conservation District, it was a little hard. I was met with, if I was trying to find answers to certain permitting questions, it's like, well, it's on our website. Go ahead and check out the website. There's plenty of information in the codes. It's like, I'm not an expert with codes, and neither are my farmers when we're trying to just get a waste storage facility built. And like, what does that mean? When we're trying to build a structure that's just 4 foot tall retention walls that has a pole barn with all 4 sides open, like having that language and coming to the permitting desk, like I didn't know that having just specific wording on paper made a difference. And having Ashley is just another entry point that makes it easier for farmers to get that certain permitting questions answered. So it's been really helpful.
One thing I did want to highlight is state did fund through the State Conservation Commission. We have 5 conservation projects that are on the ground
Yeah.
or will be on the ground.
They're on the ground now, and we actually have 6 currently running through our VSP participants right now. But 5 of them are particularly funded through the Voluntary Stewardship Program.
Right. And that was new funding that came down from the state this year, which was very important to this particular program. So that was in addition to the grant funding that actually runs this program.
Chair, could I jump in there?
Yep, go ahead.
Is there coordination going on between Thurston and the Department of Agriculture over there on Black Lake? And Jeff Swojak, I think, used to be the coordinator for them, and they probably have somebody new by now. I think he retired. But do you folks work together on some of this?
So yes, we do. We actually coordinate with all of the federal and state agencies on conservation projects. Both NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Commission, U.S. Fish and Wildlife's partnership. Oh, help me with the name.
Partners for Fish and Wildlife.
Okay. But our state agencies as well. So yes, we do a lot of partnership with those entities.
The Conservation District facilitates a monthly meeting where we meet together with NRCS and Partners for Fish and Wildlife, the district. We meet with WSU Extension and Eco Studies. We try to facilitate all of our non-regulatory partners together so we're not double dipping, because we've had situations where we've shown up on a farm where boats passing in the night, like we leave and they're showing up. It's like, hey, we could have shared resources, we're wasting time and labor. Let's meet and cross-pollinate and make sure that we're getting these landowners everything that they can need on site and be more efficient with our time and our efforts. So we meet once a month to make sure that we're reaching all of our operators in Thurston County more effectively.
Yeah, and they're all invited and for the most part participate quarterly with our Voluntary Stewardship Program work group.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, time is up.
Okay, well, thank you all for this wonderful presentation. And with that, it is 9:31 a.m. We are adjourned.